Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, Nikki Kinzer. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm well and refreshed. Took a weekend little vacation with my beautiful wife. I didn't tell you this before the show, but it's because we are celebrating, actually, this coming weekend, 22 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
22
fantastic.
in a row.
In a row.
All of them. Yeah. So that's got to be, you guys are, did you pass 22 already?
We're 20.
Oh, you're 20.
We're 20 years.
Congratulations, almost to you. But it's like, have we passed it? When was it?
Yes, we passed it, and it was pretty low key. In fact, I don't even think maybe we had dinner get brought
come
in.
On.
Yeah.
It's like a big deal.
It is a big deal. And we will be doing something. It's just that neither one of us felt comfortable traveling yet.
Mm-hmm.
And with my husband's MS, we have to be really careful with that.
Course.
So we're going to do something at some point. It will definitely be in celebration of marriage.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because it was an opportunity this weekend to reflect as we're traveling, spending hours in the car together and eating every meal together and all this stuff, and realizing what an incredible position of privilege it is to have this person to whom I am married and also is my best friend.
Yes. And she's a wonderful lady from my point of view.
She's delightful. She's a real charmer. But the whole idea is that it is the friendship that I don't have to work as hard for, right? It's because it is the easiest friendship I have in my life. And what is the deal? So after our conversation last week, talking to Melissa about friendships and ADHD, this is an anomalous relationship that I have with my wife. And thank goodness I have it the way I do. I feel incredibly lucky that ADHD hasn't gotten in the way, but it does make me a little bit more introspective about friendships and why those that aren't easy. And so we're going to talk more about that today, right?
Yeah. Well, and I also know from working with you and you talking about your friends, and we've had some of your really good friends on the show before. You have some deep relationships. You've got some really solid, deep relationships, and they've really held up over a lot of time and space because you don't all live in the same state. And
but still, they weirdly take more work, and I'm less secure day over day. And I'm curious as to why that is. And so we're going to talk about anxiety and RSD and friendship, things that came up in our conversation. And so we're going to explore some more of that today. Before we do that, head over to TakeControlADHD.com. You can get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and we will let you know each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD. And if this show has ever touched you or helped you make a change in your life for the better, we invite you to head over to patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. There, you can take part in investing in the growth of this show for a few bucks each month. You can join us. You can join us for live streams. You can join our super secret Discord channels in our ADHD community, which is wonderful. You can invest in Pete's future members-only podcast, which is with every member, another member closer to releasing Pete's technology and workflow podcast. Your guess is as good as mine what that's going to be all about. Very excited about it. I got to tell you, as a little aside, I was riled up this weekend about consolidation in the podcasting industry and all of these companies that, like Spotify and Liberty FM and all these are the biggest companies in podcasting, throwing tons of money in ad technology to measure where your ears are and measure who you are. Just all the same invasive privacy stuff going on in advertising is going on in podcasting. And so all these little podcast networks are being bought up and consolidated into bigger networks so they can track you and trace you and do all that. We don't do any of that stuff. Honestly, I have no interest in it. I don't want to know what time you're listening to the show. I don't want to know if you're lying in bed or driving in your car. I don't want to know any of that. I just want to know that we're helping you make a change in your life for the better with ADHD. That is our number one most important thing. But it really, honestly, it takes support of the community to help us continue to do this the way we have been doing it, and to make sure that we do it with attention to privacy, and that we're not tracking you, and that we haven't given up on protecting the data about our users, about our listeners and supporters. So, if that is any sway with you, it certainly does with me. I hope you consider patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Thank you for your support. We're going to talk about anxiety and RSD and friendships today. And I ran across this article in The Atlantic that I wanted to share. And in fact, I'll post in Show Talk the link and the image that goes along with it, because it's really important. Melissa, do you remember what Melissa said about the number of like super close friends that you maintain and have in your life? It was like a handful,
well,
like two or
felt
three.
like it was under 5.
Yeah.
Like most of the time it's under 5.
Well, Robin Dunbar wrote a book called Friends, Understanding the Power of Our Most Important Relationships. And just to forgive me, I'm going to read a little bit. You might recall the author's name from his concept of Dunbar's number, that on average, people can maintain about 150 friendships with others, a limit that is determined by human brain size and function. The chart is a more detailed version of the concept. It shows roughly the number of people that we can have meaningful relationships with at various levels of intimacy, right? And so it's like, imagine a target, like a bullseye, right? And at the middle, he calls that ego. And that number is 1.5. He calls those intimates. We can have 1.5 intimates in our lives. Those are clearly our, your spouse, your partner, your romantic relationships, right? Close friends, 5. That's the next circle out. You get 5 of those. 15, best friends. 50, good friends. 150, friends. 500 acquaintances, 1,500 known names, and 5,000 known faces. That is a level of detail in our friendships that I had never really considered. And Dunbar goes on and says the innermost layer of 1.5, the most intimate, clearly that's your romantic relationships. The next layer of 5 is your shoulders to cry on friendships. They're the ones who will drop everything to support us when our world falls apart. The 15 layer includes the previous 5 and your core social partners. They are our main social companions, so they provide the context for having fun times. They also provide the main circle of exchange for childcare. We trust them enough to leave our children with them. I think that's kind of an interesting measure. And the next layer up at 50 is your big weekend barbecue people. And the 150 layer is your weddings and funerals group who would come to your once-in-a-lifetime event. The layers come about primarily because of the time we have for social interaction, that it is not infinite. You have to decide how to invest that time, bearing in mind that the strength of relationships is directly correlated with how much time and effort we give them. That last line, to me, is very important, because when you are living with ADHD and social anxiety and RSD, the time that you have becomes compressed by your anxiety. You don't have the amount of time to invest in your friendships because some of that time is taken up by feeling crappy about not being a great friend or feeling rejected or whatever. That's why I think this conversation is so important, as an extension of our conversation last week with Melissa Orlov.
Yeah, that's a really interesting article, interesting way of thinking about it, because I know with my son just going through graduation, I was thinking in my mind, I haven't done this yet, but I was thinking in my mind, making a list of everybody that I need to send his announcement to.
Sure.
And that, it is interesting when you talk about the kind of the groups of people, like where that would fall. So that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I think one of the things that really resonated and kind of stuck with me with our conversation with Melissa last week is just how tied RSD and anxiety are to friendships.
Yeah.
Because the anxiety of course is the social anxiety, but the RSD, that rejection sensitivity, I mean, it just screams, I think, friendships, right? Like to especially even to get back into friendships, or you haven't talked to somebody in a while, like that, there's just so much, what if they don't like me anymore, and what if I did something and I didn't know that I did something. So One of the things I thought that would be really interesting for us today is to confront these things. I don't know if we really have answers to them, right? We're not here to solve the world. But I do think it's an interesting conversation. I know it's something that so many of us struggle with. And also, one of the things that you pointed out in that article, without you really knowing that you pointed this out, and also something that I think Melissa said, is I don't think more friends I don't think that's better.
Right.
Right. I think that we're looking for those two groups. We're looking for the 5 people, that are going to stand by us and understand us. And it's not that the acquaintances or the people that you run into at school or work aren't important, but they also don't need to hold that space in your mind that contains so much anxiety about them. Like they're not worth that. Like,
right.
Let that go.
Yeah.
Right. And then I wonder if, would that then ease yourself a little bit into opening the space of, really building those relationships that matter. So,
well, that's a really good question. And I think an interesting place to start, mostly because one of the effects of like social anxiety disorder is that it almost doesn't matter what the real effects are of a relationship with that person. Your reality of it is it makes you feel bad about yourself. So just letting go of a particular relationship might not actually fix anything because you feel so bad about yourself, and it might get in the way of going out and making new friends. I know that is certainly a pandemic, like a knock-on pandemic effect. You haven't seen somebody in a long time. You feel bad about not having seen anybody in a long time. You don't know how to get out. There's this sort of cave syndrome that we've talked about, and you don't know how to do it anymore. So you don't do it, and then you feel you have this negative self-worth and limited self-talk, negative self-talk, and it's a cycle that is very difficult to shake.
Right. Well, and you brought up something that I'm curious about. And I don't know the answers to this, but where's the connection? Where's the line between, and is there one, between RSD and social anxiety? Like, I don't know enough about social anxiety to tell you that I'm an expert on it, or even to really talk about it in the way that you just talked about it. I can talk about my own personal anxiety, but that's not necessarily social anxiety.
Right.
And so, it's interesting to me of where does the therapy then come in, right? To confront those thoughts and what's stopping you from living your life. Because one thing we know is we need to have connection.
Yes.
And if we don't have any connection, we're going to live very miserable lives. And so it's sort of like with anxiety. I know before I was getting diagnosed with it, or was getting diagnosed with it, it's the impact. Like, how much does this impact your daily life? And it obviously impacted me daily. Same thing with ADHD. If you look at the ADHD symptoms and you're being evaluated, they want to know, what is the impact? Like, are you procrastinating, every day, or is this once a week, or like what is the impact of it? So I just think it's an interesting topic, of figuring out like where is it a real therapeutic problem where you need professional help, and where is it with you just getting the permission to say it's okay that I don't have to justify who I am to these people that I don't really care about.
Well, let me just say, anytime you feel like you need professional help, you should get professional help.
Exactly.
So there's one.
That's true.
I think this is helpful. There was some research done that was published in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders in June 2014 that we've talked a little bit about it on the What's That Smell Anxiety show, and so I happen to have some crossover research that I think is interesting.
You have some information about this.
Well, and this is the flag that I raise for people who live with social anxiety disorder. It is because of social anxiety disorder, you have an out of proportion perception of how people feel about you in the negative direction. You think people don't like you very much because of how you feel about yourself in social contexts. The reality is, and has been studied and reported and researched, is people like you more than you think they do, right? That has to be a mantra if you're living with social anxiety. People like you more than you think they do. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. Say it over and over and over again. I wonder if you go back to that chart that we just had, if you were to sit down and actually put names to like those first 4 groups, like who are your intimates, who are your close friends, who are your friends, like can you put names to those people? And are they in the right place? If you ask them to do the same of where they would put their name on your list, where would it be? Like, that's an interesting exercise that I've been kind of noodling over the last couple of days since I read this original Dunbar article. Like, the perception of our relationships, which our reaction is defined as anxious or rejection focused, is probably not in reality.
Well, and what's so interesting about that chart that you're looking at too is that as you were talking about that, like, should they be moved? And I'm thinking there are people that I don't necessarily speak to even on a monthly basis, but I would say I probably keep in touch with them, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, who would still be in that 5.
100%. Yes.
So it may not be in my daily life, but they're still in that 5, that if something happened or I need to talk about something, I know they'll be there for me to listen, to not judge, and help me get through it. And so it's not this black and white linear, this is what a friend should look like, and this is how long you should have been friends with this person to trust them. I mean, there just isn't any rules around this at all.
Right. And change is not something to be feared, even though we often fear it. Fear it.
Of course.
Friends come and out, friends come and go, relationships change over time. As you said, our closest friends, those are the relationships you can count on. They're your, help me hide a body friends.
Right.
You probably don't talk about your friendships like that, but I got friends.
No, I have a couple that I could, and I have one in particular who would like not only help me with it, she would have all the ideas, and they would be good ones.
Yeah, you count on that. That. Yeah. So I think that's really important, is to remember, and this is the one time where I think recognizing that we're suffering alone isn't a bad thing, right? When I remember that my perception is blown out of proportion because of social anxiety and what it does to my brain, that it's likely not reflected in reality, that makes it feel less powerful.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, because do you think that you would fit into having social anxiety?
I think I have really good close friends. I think I'm good at that. There is this, but I'm terrible at the regular, like, day-to-day chatting. I end my days generally with that sense of shame that I haven't responded to this such and such email, or I haven't sent a text in a while. I haven't just reached out and told people, hey, I'm thinking about you, kind of comments.
Do people do that?
Thank you. That actually helps me.
Do people really just send a text and say, hey, I'm thinking about you? Like, just randomly? I mean, yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess they do.
I do that.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, but it's not the thing that I say, oh, I need to do this every day, or I need to do, like, it's not a goal.
I'm going to kick this back onto your court. Your husband just did that to me like 3 days ago.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
What'd he do?
He is a role model of a gentleman right there. Your husband.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a sweetheart.
Fantastic. Yeah.
What did he do?
Well, it was several years ago that I was down there and we did a photo walk, and a picture had come up.
Oh, he showed me the photo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And he sent me a message, and, he made a joke and he blamed me for something that was not my fault. But
it was his foot, the way that his foot looked.
His hips looked funny. And he was like, now I know why everything's gone all cattywampus. And I told him I should have been carrying him the whole time. And so, we had this little exchange. But you know what? That is a voice from because I consider him one of my close friends that,
right.
I'm sure he would help me hide a body.
Oh, of course he would.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be able to carry it.
No. But this is the point.
Be able to like help you.
and I think adding to that, when you are feeling that sort of rejection inside, doing something like your husband did for me, I think can be healing in its own right. Like being able to write a message and say, hey, I'm thinking about you when I am in a place of darkness, makes me feel better. because it
Right.
starts a chain of interaction that is that opens the door for reciprocation, and that's
Mm-hmm.
healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very. I don't think a lot of people do that. I think also, and I think specifically around men, and we're seeing that change. But men have a hard time doing that too.
Oh, for sure.
Speaking in hopefully broad stereotypes,
Right.
that's a thing that isn't
So you have teenagers. I have teenagers.
allegedly.
Yeah. My older teenager, I don't know. He never really had much of an issue with this, but
Hmm.
every once in a while he would come up and talk about being disappointed by a friend or something like that. But I have a lot of conversations with my daughter about friendships
Hmm.
and, what makes good ones and like when does it cross the line like that. And even though they're in this sort of like dramatized area of their life,
Hmm.
there's a way you treat people and there's a way you don't treat people.
Hmm.
And so it's having these conversations with her of, you may think this person is your best friend, but if they're going around and doing this and talking to you about this way, or about you in this way, is that the kind of friend you can really trust? No, it's
Hmm.
not. So then
Hmm.
how do you navigate through that? So I'm just curious if you've had conversations like that with your kids about friendships and just the relationship of how to be a good friend to someone.
Yeah, we have a lot, and we were told we actually got some help from a therapist at one point who just gave us a little bit of guidance that it's important to remember when you're that age that your friends are doing things possibly not out of malice,
Hmm.
but pushing boundaries because they have to learn. And there is a
Hmm.
part of it that is sort of social development. It's rooted in social development,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Good point.
That they need to get burned. Both the one that is doing the thing that feels malicious at the time, and the
Hmm.
person who is infringed upon in that way. Those actions in isolation are pushing social boundaries to see what happens
Right.
when I do this thing, right? Superficially, can I get away with this thing? Like, is this a thing that's going to pay off in good ways, bad ways? Like, what's it going to look like to me in the future? The challenge that we have is that the context really matters, right? When you do
Yes.
something where social groups are so entwined online, and every infraction, every mistake, every social faux pas is magnified by social media and by TikTok and all these things, the level of embarrassment and
Oh, so high.
it's so high. And that's
Yeah.
something that even you and I didn't have to deal with quite as severely as kids
No.
today do. So
Mm-mm.
we try to have that conversation, that I know
Hmm.
you feel like this was a thing that was malicious and targeted, and
Hmm.
maybe it's bullying, right? Maybe it's just
Hmm.
straight up bullying. Maybe it's just their frontal lobe is really mushy right now, and we're
Hmm.
trying to get to the point where they understand, and they make some experiences that are going to remind them what I did is not okay, and the
Hmm.
cost now might be the end of this relationship.
Hmm.
It might be.
Well, and that's the thing is that, in just some of the conversations that I've had with her on this one particular friend, it really has come down to that. I said, okay, you can go ahead and forgive them for what they've done here and what they've said, but you also might want to make it very clear that if they go down that road again, that the friendship is over.
Yeah.
Like you can offer your forgiveness, but then, but then what if it happens again? Like
Yeah.
so it's also kind of teaching those boundaries because especially for her being a new to not only friendships but potentially romantic relationships down the road, I don't want her to be in a position where she can get manipulated
Yeah.
easily and
Yep.
have a gaslighter come in and just, roll all over her because she has a kind heart.
Hmm.
So it's these tricky conversations and we have to have them with ourselves too, not
We
just with
sure
our
do.
children, but
Yeah.
we have to, I mean, I know in my life and I'm sure Pete you have too, have had toxic relationships with people.
Yeah.
And maybe the best thing, you don't necessarily see it at the time when they're starting to kind of divide or you go separate ways, but then looking back I can see, well, there's probably a reason why that friendship didn't really continue, or I
Yeah.
don't really miss it as much as I did in those first few months, or
Right.
whatever. But it is interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I think more than anything, it's just
It's right to reinforce. I think having those with our kids reinforces it for us. Like, oh,
right,
yeah, there are lines which shall not be crossed, right? There are lines that
right.
just decrease the value in the relationship. And what are those lines? What do they look
Well,
like?
and it does go both ways. That was something that Melissa definitely said last week, is that
Mhm.
it's a two-way relationship. And I think that, with folks who have ADHD, it does probably seem really not a burden, but it seems really hard to know that I'm going to have to somehow keep up with this.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're realistic with what we're saying is, you don't have to have 100 close friends. If you can have like, 2 to 5, it may not be as hard as it feels,
Hmm.
or as big as you think it is right now. And I think what you were saying, and when we were looking at this like chart thing, is you do have to have time. Where is the time? And where do you decide to spend your time?
Hmm.
And so it can be very complicated. And I've lost a couple of friends in my adulthood, and I don't really know why. I have a good
Hmm.
idea, but I don't really know why.
I mean, I
But
lit a
I've had
car on
to,
fire, but that's
but
fine.
that's okay. But having a really good friend and then all of a sudden they become an acquaintance, and I'm not really sure why. But you have to deal, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit too, is dealing with that rejection. Is
Yeah.
how do you deal with that disappointment? Because what if that person isn't necessarily blowing you off because they have ADHD and they don't have the time for it? It's because they really don't, they're not gelling with you, or you're
Yeah.
not gelling with them. That's really disappointing. It's like a breakup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when those friends broke up with me, it hurt.
Yeah.
And it sucked. And I was really disappointed, and I didn't understand why. And I was like, what did I do? And so one of the things I think, I went on to this thing called Google.
Oh, you said, where can I find new friends?
Yeah. No. I said, how can I deal with disappointment? And I found an article that I really liked, and we'll put it in the show notes. It's from Dr. Rada, and it's 5 ways to deal with disappointment. So I just want to go through quickly the 5 key points.
Okay.
Number 1, we can be sad. And I just think that's good. Like, it gives you permission to be sad. Like, this isn't fair. Like, this is sad. I don't, and do a little bit of self-loathing, right?
Yeah.
Like, God, I must be really bad.
Or it gives you an opportunity to learn. Like, I'm feeling
Yeah.
grief because of something, and I should probably know what that is.
Right. So we can be sad. We may not ever know why something worked or didn't work, which is why letting go is part of the healing process. And I can tell you from personal experience, this is where I talk about with those 2 friendships, is that I'm not exactly sure, but I don't think it matters. What I have to do at some point is let it go. Now, I'm still sad about it. But I don't think about it as much as I used to. And I don't think about trying to repair it like I used to.
Right.
So I've been able to kind of just let that go. That's part of my story. It's part of when we're talking about friendships, that's part of my story.
Well, and I think that's a really important observation, because one of the things that comes with social anxiety and RSD is perseveration, right?
Mm.
And it's so easy to make up a negative story and not to let it go, especially living with ADHD. It's really hard to let it go. We've had whole shows dedicated to, letting it go. And this is where that comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3, something wasn't right. Now you know more about yourself and what you need in friendships from other people. And so, yeah, something wasn't quite right. It's that whole line. It's not you, baby. It's me.
It's me.
And you know what? That could be true. Like, it probably is your fault. You know what I mean? But yeah, something's not quite right.
Yeah.
And then number 4, it may really not be you.
Yeah.
You can't control what others think. And there's that whole saying of it's not your business on what somebody thinks of you. You can't change it,
Right.
You can try, but what they think is their business. It's not ours necessarily.
Sure.
So coming to terms with that when you have anxiety is hard. Like, I want to control everything.
Yeah.
And now I'm being told that I can't.
It's probably why the friendship wasn't going very well either.
Maybe. Something is better. Now, I think that this is true in a lot of things, not just relationships, but believing in yourself, believing that things will work out, believing that this too shall pass. I mean, I just think there's something about having faith about, you're going to get through this. This disappointment isn't going to hurt as much as it is right now, and it's going to look different, and hopefully we can learn something from it, and maybe we won't, other than being able to let go of something that you didn't have control over.
Yeah, right.
And that, I think, is really important. And one thing I want to say that has hit me about anxiety, I was watching a TV show, and it had the author of Glennon Doyle. She's very popular right now.
Yes, she's very popular. I just listened to one of her podcast episodes.
Did you like it?
Yes. With caveat.
Okay, what's the caveat?
Well, it's a separate thing. You finish your conversation.
Well, author of Untamed.
Yes.
Right. And I have the book Untamed, and I've read most of it. It's one of those books that I don't read all the way through.
Yeah.
But there is something that she said in this interview that was really, really hit me, and I keep thinking about it. She said, like, with living with anxiety, there's a lot of what ifs, right? What if I had done this? What if I had taken this turn or this choice or whatever? And then when we're thinking about the future, what if this happens? What if the worst does happen? And then she says, but what I think about when I'm starting to spiral is I think, what is right now?
Mm-hmm. And
she said 100% of the time, I'm okay right now.
Yeah.
And that really hit me, because I thought, and what she said about it too, is she goes, if you can 100% say what is, I'm okay. I'm not saying you're great or that you're not sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay. Then have faith that the next time you're in this what if spiral, if you go back to being what is, that you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was really great.
It gets back to that lesson that we learned from Michelle Chalfant, right? Living in fact and truth.
Right.
What do you know, as you say, right now? What do you know about this moment? And everything else is fiction. Mm-hmm. Everything else is made up. And I think that's really, really important and super useful. I think once you build a practice of it, like all of these things, it involves a practice. It involves consciously being aware of your state right now and doing that every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. You got anything else? We wrap it up?
Well, I'm curious about what you thought of the podcast.
It's just totally unrelated to friendship, but it was it was an episode on fun.
Oh.
And yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe we need to do our own episode on fun as a bonus episode during the hiatus. I don't know, but it got me. It's provocative. It's got me thinking and talking, and me and Kira have been talking about it constantly about what it means to have fun. So that's a good thing. Yeah, it is a good thing. It is a good thing. And it was a conversation with her and her wife, Abby Wambach, who I adore. I think she's awesome. And her sister, Amanda. And the three of them talked about it. It was actually Abby who brought this topic to Glennon and Amanda and said, you don't know how to have fun. And I have a whole career out of having fun. And we need to talk about that in terms of an intervention, because you're going to burn out. And it was really great when you think about, what is it that I do that really is fun? Unpredicted outcome. Don't know how it's going to end. I'm not doing something painful now so that I'll get a joy out of it later. Like cleaning the garage is not fun, even if you think having a clean garage might be fun later.
Right.
Like, how do you reinterpret what you do for fun? And that hit me so hard, because I don't know.
Yeah, so you're thinking about that. That's interesting.
Thinking hard about
so
it.
she obviously has these little tidbits that get people thinking, because I was thinking about the what is, and you're thinking about the fun. And I know one of the things she said too about Abby, because she had come on, she had interrupted the interview, and then when she left, Glennon was saying, yes, Abby has a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
and she was talking about how we need to feel. And she's like, yes, she has a lot of feelings. And it was cute. It was just a cute way of like talking about that, but what was still kind of lighthearted. And so I'm going to check it out. I'm going to check her podcast out. I do like the book. And it's great to have people out there that make us think. Yep.
That's right. That's right. So anyhow, we'll put a link. That'll be fine. You'll be great. Yeah. So that's it. And this is, I hope this is continued inspiration on thoughts about friendships and anxiety and RSD. And just remember, you're probably overthinking somebody else's opinion of you.
It's true.
They like you more than you think they do. Yeah. Hey, thanks, everybody. We appreciate you downloading and listening to the show. Thank you for your time and your attention. And don't forget, if you have something to contribute about this conversation, head over to the Show Talk channel in our Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level. I'm going there right now to post my friendship chart. It's going to be great. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD Podcast.